All right, we're good. Thank you.
Okay, so let's get into an example here. We're going to be talking about a new product rollout. And we're going to be requesting support staff, so some resources to support that new product rollout. And we'll start with an example that's maybe not so successful. And you can see these bullets here in the business case template that I'm going to share at the end. There's a longer form version of this, but this is just sort of an abridged version for the purposes of our conversation. So let's get into it. Problem opportunity statement. The current support staff does not have the capacity to support the planned volume and will provide subpar service. Okay, those aren't good things. No one's happy. The support staff doesn't have the capacity and the service is going to be subpar. But it's not sufficient. It needs to be linked to a business outcome. So we'll talk about how to do that on the next slide. Okay, let's get into KPIs. Our primary KPI is customer satisfaction score. We just talked about that. Primary KPI needs to be something top line, either revenue or costs. So we all love customer satisfaction score, but you need to link it to one of those. Let's look at the out of scope. So out of scope is the success of the new product rollout. You're making this harder than it needs to be. There's a strategic priority that's already been agreed for this new product rollout. You should link this request to that strategic priority. And lastly, I'll note on this slide the assumptions down here about the need to hire 2 new support staff. Now, what's wrong with that is it's not linked to a metric. There always needs to be a ratio. So instead of saying 2 new support staff, it would be, what is the cost required per a certain amount of expected revenue? And we'll look at what that looks like in a minute. And the issue with just saying 2 new support staff is that it doesn't provide opportunity to scale the request up or down based on changes in assumptions. Okay, so let's get into the same example, but a little bit more successful. So problem opportunity statement here. As part of our strategic opportunity to enter the X space, we are launching product Y. In order for the product launch to achieve its revenue objective, we need to hire and enable new staff. Great, so already in this problem opportunity statement, we're achieving those first 3 items. We are linking to a business outcome and a metric, which is the revenue here, and we're linking to a strategic priority, which is this product launch. Let's talk about the KPIs. So here, you have that primary KPI, which is incremental revenue. Great, so you're talking about revenue. But you have leading metrics of net promoter score, customer satisfaction. So those are still an important part of the story here. You just need to link those to incremental revenue. And one way you could do that is say, by having a certain amount of customer satisfaction, that's going to increase your customer retention rate, and that's going to increase your incremental revenue. Strategic context. You can see here, the product team has estimated the market opportunity, and you're including that information here. That's great. The product team has done all this work making their case for the new product rollout. So you should leverage it to make your case stronger for the support staff. And then you can see here under the assumptions, instead of just saying we need the 2 FTEs, you have a ratio. So it's a certain investment required based on the expected revenue. And again, that way you can scale it either up or down. And then lastly, under dependencies, you have some dependencies listed here. So you have a team to create enablement material, you have a feedback loop for a product with the product team. And that's important because you're linking to a strategic priority here. So it's not just on the support staff to make this successful. It's a broader strategic effort. Okay, so let's lift out and talk about some tips and tricks. So I just spent 5 minutes talking about how this is all about business outcomes. And it is all about business outcomes. But it is also about people. Because who are you convincing at the end of the day, right? Is this an AI bot or is this a person? It's a person, right? And people are not totally rational. So the goal here, again, is not to get rid of all the possible objections, because this is a human and you don't know what they're going to end up deciding. The goal is to mitigate them. And if your business case does get rejected, don't take it personally. It's not the right time for every business case. So if we think about this example, it's really optimizing towards revenue. But let's say your business, as many businesses are today, is more focused on efficiency and reducing costs at the moment. Maybe it's not the right time for this investment request. Maybe you do want to release the product and provide, not the type of quality of service that you otherwise could because the focus is cost. And that's fine. That's a business decision, but you need to understand that. So understand your company's decision-making process. Who's making this decision? What are the strategic priorities of the company? Again, along the lines of people, you want to seek buy-in from your cross-functional partners. You don't just want to go ahead and take this request to the person deciding. You want to come armed with buy-in from, in this example, you would definitely have wanted to talk to the product leader who is advocating for this new product release to begin with. You want to make sure that they are supportive and will advocate that you need the support staff to make this a success. And then lastly, we didn't get into this here, but you might have seen something IRR and these acronyms. You might not be super comfortable with these business metrics. And in most cases, that's totally fine. And you can find support from your colleagues, again, to make your business case more robust. If you're not comfortable, you might try to ask an FP&A resource if you have one within your company. But you need to include metrics. So if you're not comfortable, ask for help. Okay, so I will leave you with the business case template. When Ellen sends out the deck later, it will include a link to the template. You can go off and use this for your own purposes. And to recap what we talked about today, so remember to frame your business case around business outcomes and metrics, align with a broader strategic priority. But remember, this is fundamentally about convincing people. Thanks for listening. Looking forward to the conversation, and I will hand it back to Paul.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Lisa, if you wouldn't mind, I tried to click on the link to the doc that you shared, and it's not clickable on the screen share. So if you could just put that in the chat, that would be great. If that's easy. And if not, we can do that later.
Sure, I can do that.
All right. Couple questions. Folks, if you have any questions about this or want to have general questions at all, please feel free to post those. Lisa, you are now the big fish. So when questions roll in, those questions are the bait, and you get to choose which questions you respond to. Sometimes we get a bunch of questions. We don't have time to answer them. We've only got about 5 minutes to answer questions. And so if we do have a whole bunch, you can choose to answer them or not to answer them. I'll kind of kick things off as people are thinking about maybe questions that they might have. Mike's got a great question. Is the incremental revenue you're referencing a percentage of your annual subscription dollars or the support revenue for perpetual license sales?
Right. That's a great question. And this was just an example. So for the example, what I had in mind was the annual subscription number is broader than just support. But I was assuming there's not a paid support model. If you have an actual support revenue model, then I think this business case is probably easier to make and would look a little differently.
Awesome. Feel free, also anyone else out there that has thoughts on any of these questions to jump in and ask away. One question that I had for you, Lisa, this is something that I came into often, is every year, all of us are probably facing this right now. How many have actually already gone through budget forecasting or anything like that by raise of hand? You've already, okay, cool. So I'm looking, looks like most everyone. So this is about the time when the CFO comes over and says, okay, what are we expecting for next year? And you have to make projections on how your team's going to grow. Do you have any methodology or any idea on how you do that on that once a year basis? Because let me tell you what, it was challenging. I'd always sit down with sales and say, okay, well, what are we planning to sell? And then go off of that. But I don't know if anyone has, if you have other sophisticated ways of projecting that for the following year.
I mean, I would just add, or should I raise my hand? I'm sorry.
You can jump in, Teresa, for sure.
I would just add that one of the approaches I've taken across all of CX is, yes, we start with what's the committed sales bookings number. Then we look at like a bottoms up in ratios, not just, of course, success and some of the professional services that we monetize, but then also in the support organization based on productivity and utilization. So we're looking bottoms up, but what we do is triangulate that with what I like to refer to as an attribution model. What I mean by that is being able to indicate that with the engagement touch points we're having with the customer, the impact adherence to that engagement plan, we call it high, medium, low touch experiences across all those roles. What impact does that have on retention? And when we can quantify that without adhering to those touch point plans, we are causing more churn and contraction, more retention risk, then it's a lever in the business model that allows them to size. Like, if we don't get up to ideal state ratios, ideal state adherence to these plans, these are the $10 million increments of investment that are going to cost us X million in lost retention or attrition, as we call it. So there's a very nice way then to say, like, okay, you give me 5 million, you'll get, 12 million back. But if you don't give me 5 million, we're going to lose, 4 million, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And what I would add to that, so I agree with that. I think, Teresa, what you're talking about is sort of run the business plans for next year. And that's really important with sort of course of business scale, what additional resources you need. The and is, well, what else is coming in 2024?
Right.
What new products are rolling out? What new offerings are being asked for? What new geos are you going into? What's new next year? And the business cases for those look a little bit different because they're sort of one-offs. There's not already an existing course of business model for how those need to scale.
And I would add one more, and you're exactly right, Lisa. The other and is productivity that we sign up for, because I don't know any great e-staff or boardroom that won't expect that with all of that, what are the productivity gains that we're going to, as leaders, sign up for? And we have to have an action plan against that, because then it builds some credibility. I'll sign up for 15% productivity, but I still need a net incremental 10% more investment, that kind of thing.
Awesome.
Right. That's right.
Great insights. The other thing that you had me thinking about, and things we've talked about in the past year or so, is product releases. Lisa, you made me think about this. What are the product release forecasts for next year? And how big are those releases going to be? And how many users do they affect? And what kind of resources are you going to have to be able to manage those? So something else to think about. Mike, you have a question or a comment, feel free to come off mute. You'll be the last one, and then we'll move on to our breakout rooms.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think our experience of doing this over many years was that a new product launch, for example, what would happen is you'd have development, you'd have marketing, you'd have sales, you'd have support. Sales would claim all the credits. They claim all the revenue. But then marketing would say, well, we need a portion of that revenue. And support would say, well, is there any left for us? So I think you have to have very close coordination, because the reaction from the CFO is going to be, between you claim three or four times the revenue we expect to get from this product. And then the issue becomes sales can't do it on their own. They need support, they need marketing. So you need to figure out a way of apportioning that benefit, that revenue impact, whatever productivity between the different groups. That was probably the more difficult thing, just that communication and coordination to come up with something that collectively was credible before you go in front of the CFO and the CEO, because then you look kind of silly.
Right, that's exactly right. In an ideal world, the example I gave, that just would have been one business case for this new product request, right? But I know the reality is support sometimes is after the fact, right? But in an ideal world, it would have been one business case, one revenue number, and all the teams required to support it. So a holistic look at that. I do want to address this conversation in the chat around allocating CSAT or NPS, as well as Alan asked about tying to churn rates. So I think Alan sort of answered the CSAT and NPS question. I didn't get into a ton of detail on business metrics here, but you're absolutely right, Alan. The path here is CSAT and NPS has some sort of link on churn, which has some sort of link on, retention, well, churn obviously is the flip side of retention, and then revenue. So being able to link those concepts together is going to make for a much stronger business case, and churn absolutely has a place to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And everyone that's in the chat commenting and adding your thoughts, this is great. And I think it's very timely as we look into the next year. So everyone join with me in giving happy hands to Lisa. Thank you so much, Lisa, for coming in and helping stimulate the conversation. We've got a ton to talk about, and we appreciate everything that you've done here. If there have been any questions that have not been addressed, we will add those to our LinkedIn group, and we've invited Lisa's agreed to go in there and answer some of those questions. So again, thank you so much for your thoughts and joining us here today. All right. So I have the mural board queued up and ready to rock and roll. I'm going to show it to you here in a second. We are going to be getting you ready for your breakout rooms at this point. And we're going to build on the conversation that Lisa has greatly introduced to us. So again, this was last month's. I'm looking for a mess. I'm looking for great ideas. And at the end of the day, so are you all. And so what we're going to do is I've got this nice clean mural board ready to rock and roll. The discussion for your breakout rooms are what are common objections you get for investment requests, and how do you overcome those objections? I've broken the mural board up into 3 different categories: less than 200 employees, 200 to 1,000, and 1,000 plus. So when you're in your breakout room and you're all having conversation about common objections that you're getting and how you overcome those objections, please, someone in your group, write those down and share those. The goal of today is, by the end of the day, we've got some really great best practices and ideas on common objections you get at these different sizes and how you overcome those sizes. One of the points that Lisa made that I thought was really good was, many of you know this, I come from the outdoor industry. And in the outdoor industry, when you're putting together a risk assessment plan, or when you're putting just together a safety plan, it's about mitigating risk, right? So it's not about eliminating risk. It's about understanding the risk and then mitigating it as much as you possibly can. And so that's what we're hoping for here today, is that as we build this mural board, you'll be able to come into awareness of maybe some of the objections that you may not have heard, but could be coming down the line, or that are frankly talked about in closed executive doors or whatever. So these are things you can get ahead of and get in front of that are going to be really, really helpful. So anything that you add in the mural board will be highly advantageous. We're going to put you into groups of 5 people per breakout room. Now, one of the other things, I know a lot of people have a lot of thoughts on this as well. At the end of our 30 minutes here, we're going to be doing a panel discussion. So if you can stick around for the panel discussion will be unpacking how you mitigate or how you overcome common objections to getting more business resources. So Mike, Teresa, I don't know if you guys have the flexibility to stick around, and anyone else to share some examples. It would be great for you to stick around and share those thoughts and ideas. We post that recording on LinkedIn. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop our recording here because we don't want to record your conversations.